Thanks very much, Ellen. And I'm so excited to be here because, as I've already seen today, this is a group of people, all of you are people who are passionate and experienced around interoperability in the area of health. You've been working at it many years, you've tackled many challenges together of different aspects, and I'm hoping I've learned already quite a few things, and I'm hoping to learn some more from you as we talk about some of the challenges that smart cities and smart communities face in trying to bring interoperability to all the different data sets we've got. The key thing about a smart city is it's not one single thing. A smart city involves many different systems that all are tend to be managed by different agencies or clusters of agencies who focus very much on their specific area. Health, education, housing, transport, energy, water, waste. So you've got many different sectors within a city that are all focusing on how best to deliver their particular aims and objectives. And all of them are increasingly generating lots and lots of data and are using that data to help make sure that those individual systems work well together. And so what we need is to have data space where increasing amounts of that data that's being generated by many different parts of the city are able to be collected together and used by the public administration, by business, and by the citizen to help the community work better. And that's the challenge that we have to face because, as has been quite clear here, you're very well aware of the challenges of being able to bring interoperability to health-related data and working very hard with the data space and so on to tackle those challenges of how to take data that's been used for specific purposes and therefore is using formats that are appropriate for the levels of security and all the rest of it that are needed, how to enable these things that have been developed by different countries, different agencies, to start to work together so that you can bring a holistic picture of what's happening and link things together. And that's the challenge of a city or a community, much more complicated. So, of course, the city and community, why do they need data from health, from education, from transport and energy and so on? Well, a city and community needs it, first of all, because all of these different systems impact on the other systems. And so you can't just manage them in silos. You really need to have a chance to get the overall perspective of what's going on in these different areas so that you can understand better how to bring synergies together. You also need to recognize, of course, that we're not just patients, or we're not just passengers, or we're not just tenants in a housing, social housing area, or we're not just energy users. All the different systems just get a sense of one aspect of us, but we're people. And all of those things impact on our lives. And what's important, if health, if education, if transport, if you want to do a better job for your users, you need to not just see them as a patient or a passenger or whatever. You need to understand something more of the complexity of the lives of your citizens, what they face. And so the better information you can get about what kind of people live in your community, what their challenges and opportunities are, the better you'll be able to focus your particular service area to do a better job for them. And then the final thing is about me as well, that increasingly what I want to do is to be able to make sure that data about me that's held by different agencies can be shared appropriately to help those agencies tailor their services better towards me. So giving me the chance to be more active in managing data about myself to ensure that I don't have to go to lots of different offices and get documents from many different places to prove that I'm eligible for a service, but to make sure that that can all happen automatically in a well-regulated way. That's what we need to do as cities. That's our challenge, how to take all that data that's been gathered in all sorts of different formats for all sorts of different purposes. We don't need it all, but we need some of it And we need to get those data sets that are important, we need to get them quickly and easily so that we can be able to combine them and do useful things with them. So the challenge, of course, is that if we're trying to manage all of this data, it's not just about one single thing. There's lots of different aspects that a community needs to look at in order to ensure that data coming from all those different sources can be used and managed well together. Data security, data privacy, how to find the data, geospatial data, data quality, data models, data analytics, context data, all sorts of different issues all need to be thought about, and foundation needs to be laid to make sure that you can then bring the relevant data from all those different systems together for the benefit of the citizen and the city administration. So, of course, standards organisations are doing a great job around developing consistent ways of doing things to help citizen communities tackle these needs. I'm passionate about standards. I came back on Sunday from 2 weeks with the ITU Study Group 20 plenary, working through a whole range of standards relevant to IoT in cities. Next month, I'm off to the IEC general meetings where we've got the plenary of the Smart City Systems Committee that I chair. Last week, I spoke at a workshop as part of the ISO's General Assembly in Brisbane that was put on to kind of tackle some of the key issues that we face in standards organisations. Standards are really important, and a lot of great work is going on to develop good standards. Of course, if we all follow the same standards, it'll be easy, but as we've seen, that's not an easy thing to do. So the challenge is, of course, that there are many different standards organisations. They all have a different area of focus, different sets of expertise, different viewpoints, and sometimes standards from one organisation are not compatible with standards coming from another. Also, when it comes to cities and communities, standards can seem really complicated, and there are lots of standards that they need to understand to manage data effectively. And it can be really off-putting if you're talking. It's all very well for a Helsinki or an Amsterdam or a Milan to put in place a really well-built data infrastructure, data space. But if you're talking about a city of 100, 200,000 population that doesn't have a huge amount of expertise in these areas, it can just seem too difficult. The other thing is, even within a city, as we've said, it's not just about one administration that has to make sure that its data is managed in a standardized way. The city has to bring data from many different organizations, some big, some small, and they all may have a different way of handling and managing the data. And then the other issue, of course, is that very often many organizations within cities and city administrations themselves, they outsource the management of their IT department, a lot of their IT, to integrators who may have their own proprietary way of handling data. And that you can't just say, you've got to stop doing that, you've got to use this data standard. You know, you have to accept the way they do things because it all integrates with the whole package of services they provide. And so this is the challenge. Life is messy. It'd be nice if it wasn't, but it is. And when cities are trying to manage data effectively, they have to tackle the fact that cities have limited resources, there's many different methodologies out there. How can we somehow bring together a good enough level of interoperability that will enable us, the cities, to get real value from all that data that's being gathered? It's not about perfect interoperability. If very few cities and very few organizations can implement it, we need something that's useful, practical, and doable. And so, Open and Agile Smart Cities, with the support of DG Connect, C3, Unit C3, and more widely, we're working to develop minimal interoperability mechanisms that will enable all cities and communities to at least get a start in being able to share data effectively and to be able to allow data that's being gathered in one city or community to be shared in a good enough way with that in other communities. So when we say minimal, we mean sufficient interoperability to allow good enough integration. We kind of think about the 80-20 rule. What are the 20% of standards, regulations and standards that will provide 80% of the benefits? So you implement them. It doesn't take too long or too many resources to do it, but you can immediately start to see value. And that gets people, cities and communities and organizations started on the path. Minimal, so that there's no unnecessary complexity. It can be done quickly and easily. This is, these are the aspirations, what we're trying to do, and clearly enough defined, and this is, one of the key foundations of these days together, so that you can decide, is this compliant or not? It shouldn't be wishy-washy. It may be minimal, but it needs to be solid enough that you can say, yes, this organization, this city, the way they handle data complies with this minimal interoperability mechanism. So the kind of thing we keep in mind is interoperability isn't yes or no, it's interoperable, it's not. We know, I remember some of you, plug and play was such a thing we wanted in our Microsoft things many years back, and it still is a very difficult thing to achieve, real plug and play interoperability, where you just link two systems and everything works. But it's not just that or nothing. There are many different intermediate steps that you can do to find out how you can take two different approaches to managing data and identify ways that you can make it easier to integrate them and gain the value from sharing and reusing that data. And so some of the things that we've been looking at are pivotal points of interoperability and common interfaces that help make that work. So pivotal points of interoperability are about if you can define the two different approaches that need to work together and identify, if you just look at them, they may look very, very different, and they may be very, very different, but they're bound to have a number of common standards that both of them follow, or technical solutions that are common to both, or at the very least, even if they follow slightly different technical standards, there may well be common ways and easy ways to translate between them. So identifying those pivotal points of interoperability is a good way forward. And then the other way is looking at how do these particular two systems fit in with the wider system in which they need to link. What are the interfaces? And then where can we develop some common connectors where you can use APIs so that each different approach, even though it may handle data within itself in a very different way, can still use a common connector so that it looks the same and it fits in without any real problems to the overall system of which it's a part. So we're trying to look at all of those different areas. And let me just go back. So we're talking therefore about minimal interoperability. We're trying to find a consistent way to describe an approach where we take a number of steps to look at how we can best ensure that we've identified clearly the different approaches that there are, and we can easily identify ways to help share between them. So probably an easier way than that complicated lot of text there is to see that as we're working on these MIMs, we see the first thing is to create a very clear, specific objective, which is the scope, to make it as clear as possible. You don't need everything to be shared between these two different things. What are the things that you need to be able to bring together, and describe that in a way that gives it a good sense of what you're trying to achieve, and then break that down into some capabilities. What are the business requirements that achieving that objective need to be put in place? So once you've identified no unnecessary, this is the great thing, it helps you to focus down. There may be many other things about these two different systems that are important within their system, but what you're trying to do is to say, what are the key things, the key capabilities that we need to be able to get value from sharing these two different systems together? And then you turn that down. Once you've identified that minimal but sufficient set of capabilities, what are the requirements that we need to translate those capabilities into that will allow us to understand, does this system meet those requirements or not? And then having done that, and the core of a MIM is those requirements, you then can see what are the different systems that we need to integrate, the different approaches, the different technical solutions that we need to integrate that could provide, if you like, different mechanisms that we then need to bring together and to find out how we can bring interoperability between them. And the one thing I didn't show there, but it's in the full set of the MIMs, of course, is then compliance and conformance testing. So just as an example, MIM 2 is about data models, and the objective, these are all work in process, and this is really helpful if you can use your brain and help us get this really right. So MIM 2, we're reviewing it, and we've got this objective that is to support the use of consistent and machine-readable definitions of all the entities about which data is being captured in a local data ecosystem, so that data about any entity can be combined with other data referring to that entity and every instance of that entity in the confidence that they refer to the same thing. So that's a very fundamental thing, to be sure that you different data sets, they're all referring to the same type of thing and to the same example of that thing when we're trying to combine them together. So this is a bit complicated, but we've tried to have a first go at dividing that into 3 capabilities that are needed. All entities included in data sets are described using consistent data models to enable interoperability. Secondly, the data models used in a data system are machine readable and can be handled by context management APIs. And then thirdly, all data sets in a data ecosystem use consistent identifiers for individual instances of each entity. So we're trying to be fairly simple and basic there to focus down on what are the key things that we need to require to start to look at how we can integrate these different approaches. So, and you can see, I won't go through them all, but for the first capability, requirement 1 is a very basic one, that data models used for all entities in any data set should be made explicit. So that's a very big, very important foundation, that we need to know what data models any data set is using. And then the second one is that there's 3 different levels, if you like. Data models should, as far as possible, be taken from a commonly recognized set of standardized data models. Because if you do that, if you're taking them from standardized sets, then you can get translation engines to translate between them. If that can't be done, then at least you should use consistent concepts and vocabularies. And then if you need new data models, because there aren't any ones that meet your needs exactly, it should be done using a commonly accepted and standardized approach. So this is the sort of level that we're trying to work on to see if we can start to put a foundation in place for getting good integration and minimal, but as good as possible, interoperability between different approaches and data sets. So that's really the MIMs, minimal interoperability mechanisms, in short. What we're trying to do is to develop them in a way that's useful globally. So Open and Agile Smart Cities is a global smart city network, and we have membership in Brazil, soon Nepal, Korea, many other places. And what we want to do is to make sure that we're setting a good foundation globally for a consistent approach to handling data for cities. But within the EU, we're working closely with the Commission on what's called MIMS Plus, and that's managed by the Living in the EU initiative that brings together cities and communities from across Europe to have a commitment to following common approaches. And so we work as we manage the technical subgroup of Living in the EU to get a European voice to make sure that the MIMs we're developing make sense for Europe. That's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah. We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
It's worth, while the brains are going, trying to take in all of this information. So what's happened has been, there has been a number of MIMs that have been out there being used by cities for a number of years. And what we're doing at the moment is standing back and seeing if we can describe them in a more consistent way and develop a more rigorous process for developing the new ones. And so this is a great chance, you know, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, we really are very open to making sure that we can take into account maybe specifically the need of the health sector within the city, but also more generally, because we want to make these really solid. We're at the moment standardizing the MIM structure through ITU Study Group 20 as a kind of an intermediate standard, if you like, something on the way towards standards. So this is, we're hoping by the middle of next year, we'll have this consented as an ITU recommendation. So now is the time when we can work hard to get these things right. Thank you. So,
yeah,
yeah, so we've got some questions.
I've got the mic.
So it was working, and then and it got stuck on one word, and that's trust. People don't like that their information is getting connected.
Sure.
When they don't know what you're going to do with it.
Exactly.
So the potential for good things is there, but people will be resilient.
Yeah. Exactly. So, absolutely. So, one of the things, I mean, listening this morning, one of the things I thought about was, of course, handling personal data, because that's one good area. If you mess up handling personal data, then that undermines trust completely. So one of the MIMs we're working on is personal data management. We're working closely with My Data Global and Solid, who are, you know, Tim Berners-Lee's initiative that's trying to ensure that our data can be managed in an effective way. And what we've developed, and I should have showed that if I'd have thought, I've got an example of that as well, of what are the kind of capabilities that need to be put in place to enable that. And that's both by data holders and data users within a community, but also by personal data management initiative, personal data intermediaries or others, so that we can, you know, working with My Data Global and others, so that we can put in place a MIM that will give confidence to the citizen about the way their data is not only being handled, but will actually give them control, much more control over managing it. Another one that we're looking at as well is a MIM 5 is on a fair and transparent AI. And what we're doing there is to think about particularly if you're a small city or community and you're wanting to use AI systems, decision-making algorithms to help with making decisions about the citizen or about spending or something like that that will affect the citizen, how can you be sure that the algorithm itself will deliver fair and appropriate decisions, and also that the data that's being used will enable that as well? So we're looking at that, and also not just to make it sure it's fair, but also to what does the city and community need to do to make sure that it's transparent, that the citizen, it's not only that the city council can say, we know that this is making decisions fairly, but what needs to be put in place to help the citizen have confidence that that actually is happening. Thank you for that. Good question. And I think somebody else now has the mic.
It's just, I thought smart cities were about sort of passenger management, traffic management, switching lights on and off at the right time, easing traffic flow on a busy day. Traffic lights change their stop-start intervals. That's part of what you're covering, I guess. And are there standards for that kind of thing already?
Well, yes. So of course, this is the trouble. So there are, of course, you've got lots of standards around intelligent transport systems as an example there. A lot of great work that's gone on about how you can manage intelligent transport systems of different kinds, different aspects. And that's true of all the different silos, if you like. But the challenge of a smart city is that it's not just lots of smart silos that are each being managed brilliantly, but completely going different directions, and because of that, don't give any coherence or don't really take account of the fact that at the center of all those different systems is the same as me. So the key challenge in the smart city is to say, great, all of these standards are there, and all the work that you're doing in health, you know, fantastic, how can we make sure, how can the city make sure, how can the citizen in the city make sure that this is happening, that the relevant data from all of these different systems is able to be brought together so that the city can use the resources available to it in the best possible way to provide the best possible outcome for the citizen. And that's, I think that's the biggest complexity and challenge we've got. It's big enough in health, as we've seen, all the different aspects you need to think about just in health. But if we want to provide consistent services to the citizen, we have to bring together much more complicated sets of things and make sure they work well. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Michael. And I think it's time for lunch.
Oh.
But just before, perhaps we can take another rendezvous for a conference during a Smart City Connection Week.
When are you thinking of?
This is just an idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Why don't we start to plan that? That might be good, yes. I mean, we're really starting to build momentum now. We have our normal event in January, but that may be too close to do something. But we are working on a number of local digital twin and digital transformation in cities projects, big projects, and it may well make sense to as part of that. Brilliant.
Okay. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, and thank you for, I've learned some good things already. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.